The auction house was crowded that Tuesday morning. Natalie Morrison stood in the back corner, watching strangers examine her childhood like merchandise on display. Her mother's pearl necklace, her grandmother's china set, the leather-bound books her father once read to her before bed. Everything carried a price tag now. 23 years old, and Natalie felt ancient. The Morrison family name, once respected in Boston's business circles, had crumbled in 6 months. Her father's tech startup, built on promises and investor money, had collapsed spectacularly. The lawsuits came first, then the creditors, then the absolute silence of friends who had once filled their home with laughter. Catherine Morrison sat in a folding chair near the entrance, her hands trembling in her lap. She looked smaller somehow, as though the stress had physically diminished her. At 51, she should have been vibrant, planning charity galas and garden parties. Instead, she clutched a tissue and watched her life disappear item by item. "We should go, Mom," Natalie whispered, kneeling beside her. "You don't need to see this." Catherine's eyes were distant. "Where did your father go?" Natalie had no answer. Her father had vanished 3 weeks ago, leaving only a note apologizing for everything and nothing. The coward's way out. That evening, in the tiny apartment they now called home, Catherine collapsed. One moment she was washing dishes. The next she was on the floor, her face gray, her breathing shallow. The ambulance ride felt endless. The emergency room was chaos. The doctor's words were clinical and devastating. Severe heart condition. She'll need surgery, medication, ongoing monitoring. Dr. Harrison's voice was kind but firm. "I won't sugarcoat this. The cost will be substantial." Natalie stared at the estimate sheet. Even with their remaining insurance, the numbers were impossible. She had 3 part-time jobs already. It would take years to earn enough, and Catherine didn't have years. The offer Richard Sterling appeared at the hospital 2 days later. He was 65, silver-haired, and moved through the world like he owned it. In many ways he did. Real estate, investments, a fortune that had grown for 3 generations. "Natalie, dear." His smile was warm, his handshake firm. "I heard about Catherine. Terrible business." She remembered him vaguely from her childhood. He had attended the same country club as her parents, always on the periphery of their social circle. "Mr. Sterling." Her voice was exhausted. "That's kind of you to visit. Your father helped me once, years ago. A business deal that saved me from bankruptcy." He pulled up a chair, his expression thoughtful. "I'd like to return the favor." Hope flickered in her chest. "Any help would be, I'll cover all of Catherine's medical expenses. Surgery, treatment, private care, everything." Natalie's throat tightened. "I can't possibly accept—" "There is one condition." Richard leaned forward, his eyes sharp despite his grandfatherly demeanor. "My son Gabriel needs a wife. Someone with breeding, education, the right background. Your family name still carries weight in certain circles. The hope died as quickly as it had sparked. You want me to marry your son?" "A mutually beneficial arrangement. Catherine gets the care she needs. You'll live comfortably. Gabriel gets a wife suitable for his social position." "What does Gabriel think about this?" Richard's smile didn't waver. "Gabriel understands the value of strategic partnerships. He's a practical man." That night, sitting beside Catherine's hospital bed, Natalie watched the machines that were keeping her mother alive. The steady beep of the heart monitor, the gentle whoosh of oxygen. Without Richard Sterling's money, those machines would go silent. She thought about calling her father, begging him to come back and fix the mess he'd created. But she knew he wouldn't answer. She thought about other options, but there were none. Not real ones. "What are you thinking about, sweetheart?" Catherine's voice was weak. Natalie forced a smile. "Nothing important. Just rest." She signed the agreement the next morning. The wedding. The ceremony took place in a private chapel on the Sterling estate. 50 guests, mostly business associates of Richard's. No friends. No celebration. Just witnesses to a transaction. Natalie wore a simple white dress, purchased by Richard's assistant. She carried white roses that reminded her of funerals. As she walked down the aisle, she felt every eye on her, judging, calculating, understanding exactly what this was. Gabriel Sterling stood at the altar in a charcoal suit. He was handsome in a sharp, calculated way. Dark hair, intense green eyes, a jaw that looked carved from stone. Everything about him was controlled, precise, cold. When she reached his side, he didn't look at her. He stared straight ahead as the minister spoke about love and commitment. The words felt like mockery. "Do you, Gabriel Sterling? Take this woman—" "I do." His voice was flat, businesslike. "And do you, Natalie Morrison?" "I do." Her voice almost broke. The kiss was brief, mechanical. His lips barely touched hers. No warmth, no connection, just obligation. At the reception, Gabriel played his part perfectly. He smiled for photographs, his hand resting on her waist with the lightest possible touch. He introduced her to his business partners with polite formality. He danced with her once, holding her like she was made of glass and thorns. "This arrangement benefits us both," he said quietly as they moved across the floor. "I expect discretion and civility. In return, your mother will receive the best care available. What about Vanessa?" The name slipped out before Natalie could stop it. She'd heard the whispers, seen the beautiful woman watching from the back of the chapel. Gabriel's expression hardened. "That's none of your concern. The mansion, the Sterling mansion, overlooked the harbor. All glass and modern architecture. Cold, impressive, soulless. Your rooms are in the East Wing," Gabriel said as they entered. He didn't offer to show her. He simply pointed. "Staff will help you settle in." "Our rooms?" she asked. He finally looked at her, really looked at her, and his expression was pure ice. "Did you actually think this would be a real marriage? You're here because my father decided it served his purposes. Don't confuse business with intimacy." He walked away, leaving her standing in the massive foyer with her single suitcase. The first week established their pattern. Gabriel left before dawn for his tech company. He returned after midnight. They were strangers sharing an address. Natalie spent her days visiting Catherine, whose health was improving thanks to the excellent care. She spent her evenings alone in her beautiful prison, eating dinners prepared by staff, sleeping in a bed too large and too cold. On the 8th night, she heard Gabriel come home. She heard voices, a woman's laugh. Vanessa's perfume lingered in the hallway the next morning. She finally understood. Gabriel had married her to satisfy his father's demands, but he had no intention of being faithful to a wife he never wanted. 3 weeks into the marriage, Natalie discovered the pattern. Every Tuesday and Friday evening, Gabriel would receive a phone call. His expression would soften in a way she never saw otherwise. He would disappear into his study, and hours later she would smell expensive perfume that wasn't hers lingering in the hallways. She told herself it didn't matter. Their marriage was a contract, nothing more. She had no claim on his heart or his time. But late at night, lying alone in her enormous bed, she felt the loneliness like a physical weight on her chest. The mansion staff treated her with polite distance. They called her Mrs. Sterling, but their eyes held pity. They knew. Everyone knew. Her mother's health continued to improve. Catherine had been moved to a private rehabilitation center, surrounded by gardens and attentive nurses. During Natalie's daily visits, she smiled and pretended everything was wonderful. "You look tired, darling," Catherine observed one afternoon. "Is Gabriel treating you well?" "He's very generous," Natalie replied, which was true. She had access to his credit cards, a closet full of designer clothes she never asked for, and unlimited resources. Everything except what she actually wanted. "That's not what I asked." Natalie changed the subject. The confrontation. The breaking point came on a Friday evening. Natalie had spent the day helping Catherine with physical therapy, watching her mother take tentative steps down the rehabilitation center's hallway. The progress was miraculous. The surgery had worked. Catherine would live. Natalie should have felt grateful. Instead, she felt hollow. She returned to the mansion earlier than usual. Gabriel's car was already in the driveway, which was unusual. She heard voices from the living room as she entered. His voice, low and warm in a way she'd never heard directed at her. And a woman's laugh, familiar and intimate. Natalie stood in the doorway. Gabriel and Vanessa Cole sat close together on the leather sofa. Vanessa was stunning, with long, dark hair and confident beauty. She wore a red dress that cost more than most people's cars. Her hand rested on Gabriel's arm. They both looked up. Gabriel's expression shifted from warmth to cold defensiveness in an instant. Vanessa's smile was challenging, almost triumphant. "Natalie." Gabriel stood, straightening his tie. "You're home early." Apparently. Her voice was steadier than she felt. "I didn't realize we were entertaining." Vanessa stood as well, moving closer to Gabriel with deliberate possession. "I should go. We can finish our discussion another time." She kissed Gabriel's cheek, taking her time, before walking past Natalie with a smile that said everything words didn't need to. The silence after she left was suffocating. "How long?" Natalie finally asked. Gabriel poured himself a drink. "How long what?" "Don't insult me by pretending you don't understand." He took a long swallow before answering. "Vanessa and I have been together for 4 years. We have an understanding." "An understanding." Natalie's laugh was bitter. "You're married to me." "On paper." He turned to face her, his green eyes hard. "You knew what this was from the beginning. Don't pretend you expected something different." "I expected basic respect. I expected you wouldn't parade your mistress through our home." "My home," he corrected. "You're living here because of a business arrangement my father forced on both of us. Don't act like you're some heartbroken wife. You got what you wanted. Your mother's alive and healthy." The words struck like physical blows. "You think that's all I wanted? You think I dreamed of being 23 and trapped in a loveless marriage to a man who can barely stand to look at me?" Gabriel's jaw tightened. "I never asked you to sacrifice anything." "Yes, you did." Her voice rose, months of suppressed emotion finally breaking free. "Every time you ignored me. Every time you made me feel like an intruder in this house. Every time you reminded me I'm just an obligation you're stuck with. You asked me to sacrifice my dignity, my self-respect, my chance at ever having something real. Real." His laugh was harsh. "You want real? Real is that I was planning to propose to Vanessa before my father decided to play matchmaker. Real is that I've spent every day of this marriage resenting both you and him for taking away my choice. Then divorce me." The words came out before she could stop them. "Set us both free." "And lose everything my father will take away? My position at the company, my inheritance, my reputation." He shook his head. "My father made sure this marriage was ironclad. We're stuck with each other for at least 5 years, or I lose everything I've built." Natalie felt tears burning her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I hate this. I hate feeling like I'm in the way of your life. I hate watching you with her, knowing that's what you wanted and I'm just the obstacle." Gabriel's expression shifted, something flickering across his face that might have been guilt, but it was gone before she could be sure. "I'll be more discreet," he said finally. "That's your solution? Be more discreet about cheating on me." "What do you want from me, Natalie? Love, romance? Some fairy tale where we pretend this is anything other than a business deal? I want you to see me as a person, not a problem." They stood there, 10 feet apart in a mansion full of expensive things and empty spaces, and the distance between them felt infinite. The storm that night, a massive storm rolled in from the Atlantic. Thunder shook the windows. Lightning illuminated the mansion in stark flashes. Natalie couldn't sleep. She sat in her room, watching the rain lash against the glass, feeling as turbulent as the weather. Around midnight, she heard Gabriel leave. She heard his car start, the engine roaring against the storm. He was going to Vanessa. Of course he was. She should have felt nothing. Instead, she felt her heart break a little more. 2 hours later, her phone rang. "Unknown number. Is this Mrs. Sterling?" The voice was professional, urgent. "This is Massachusetts General Hospital. Your husband was brought in following a car accident. You need to come immediately." The world tilted. Natalie grabbed her keys, not bothering with a coat, and ran into the storm. The hospital was chaos. Emergency lights, the smell of antiseptic and fear. A nurse directed her to the surgical wing. "He's in critical condition," the surgeon explained, still in his scrubs. "Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, head trauma. We've stabilized him, but the next 48 hours are crucial." Natalie stood outside the ICU room, looking through the window at Gabriel. He was almost unrecognizable, wrapped in bandages, connected to machines that beeped and hummed. So vulnerable. So unlike the cold, controlled man who had walked out hours ago. Richard Sterling arrived an hour later. For once, he looked old and frightened. "What happened?" he demanded. He was driving too fast in the storm. "Lost control on the harbor bridge." Richard's face was gray. "Was he alone?" Natalie understood what he was really asking. Yes, he was alone. Over the next 3 days, Natalie barely left the hospital. She slept in uncomfortable chairs. She drank terrible coffee. She watched Gabriel fight for his life through machines and medications. Vanessa came once, cried dramatically, and left when the nurses wouldn't let her stay outside visiting hours. She didn't come back. Richard came and went, making phone calls, managing crises. But when the hospital needed decisions about Gabriel's care, they came to Natalie. She was his wife. She was his next of kin. On the 4th day, Gabriel opened his eyes. Confused, disoriented, in pain. The first person he saw was Natalie, sitting beside his bed. "Exhausted and worried. You're here," he whispered, his voice rough from the breathing tube they'd recently removed. "Where else would I be?" He tried to move, winced, gave up. "Vanessa?" Something in Natalie's chest twisted. She came by. Once. Understanding flickered in his eyes, followed by something that might have been shame. "You stayed," he said. "You're my husband." The words came out simple, honest. "I know you don't want to be. I know you wish this had never happened. But when that hospital called, I was terrified. Because despite everything, I don't want you dead. Gabriel." He looked at her for a long moment, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time since their wedding day. "The doctors said I'll need months of recovery. Physical therapy. I might not walk properly again. Then we'll deal with it." "Why?" His voice cracked. "Why would you do that for me after how I've treated you?" Natalie took his hand carefully, mindful of the IV lines. "Because underneath all your anger and resentment, I think there's a decent person who's been hurt and is too scared to let anyone close. And maybe, if we're stuck in this marriage anyway, we could try being kind to each other." Gabriel's eyes filled with tears, the first real emotion she'd seen from him. "I don't deserve your kindness." "Probably not," she agreed. "But I'm going to give it to you anyway." 6 weeks after the accident, Gabriel came home. The mansion had been transformed. The East Wing now held a hospital bed, physical therapy equipment, and rails installed along the hallways. Natalie had overseen every detail, working with his medical team to create a space where he could heal. Gabriel sat in his wheelchair, staring at the changes with an unreadable expression. He looked thinner, tired, but his green eyes held something new. Awareness, vulnerability. The arrogance had been stripped away by pain and dependency. "You did all this?" he asked as Natalie guided him through the space. The staff helped. Dr. Harrison consulted on the equipment. She kept her voice light, practical. "Your physical therapist will come 3 times a week. I've arranged a schedule." "You didn't have to." She stopped the wheelchair, came around to face him. "Gabriel, I meant what I said at the hospital. We're in this together now. You can keep pushing me away or you can let me help. Your choice." For the first time, he didn't push her away. Small beginnings. The first weeks were difficult. Gabriel hated being dependent. He hated needing help to bathe, to dress, to move from bed to wheelchair. His pride fought against every assistance she offered. But slowly, grudgingly, he began to accept her presence. Natalie learned his routine. She woke early to help him with morning exercises. She learned which medications he needed when, which foods he could tolerate, how to tell when he was in pain, even when he insisted he was fine. She read to him in the afternoons when the pain medication made him too drowsy to focus on work emails. At first, she chose business journals and news articles. Then one day, on impulse, she brought out her favorite novel from her old life. "What's that?" Gabriel asked, eyeing the worn paperback suspiciously. "It's a story about a ship captain and a stowaway who fall in love during a storm." He raised an eyebrow. "Sounds ridiculous." "It is," she smiled. "But it's also beautiful." She read 3 chapters before he fell asleep. When she tried to leave, his hand caught hers weakly. "Don't stop." So she stayed, reading softly until the sun set, his hand still holding hers. Breaking down. Walls one evening, 3 months after the accident, Gabriel attempted to walk with his cane. Natalie watched from nearby, ready to catch him if he fell. He made it 5 steps before his leg buckled. She caught him, steadying him, and for a moment they stood pressed together, his weight against her, his breath warm on her face. "I've got you," she whispered. He looked down at her, their faces inches apart. "You always do." Something shifted in that moment. A recognition passed between them, electric and terrifying. Gabriel pulled back, retreating to his wheelchair. But the awareness remained. Later that night, as she helped him settle into bed, he spoke suddenly. "Vanessa called today." Natalie's hand stilled on the blanket. "Oh?" "She wanted to know when I'd be recovered enough to see her." He stared at the ceiling. "I told her not to call again." Natalie's heart skipped. "You ended it?" "There's nothing to end. What we had was shallow and convenient. I see that now." He turned his head to look at her. "She visited me once in the hospital." "You were there every single day. You held my hand through surgeries. You learned my medications. You've seen me at my absolute worst, and you're still here." "I made a commitment." "No." His voice was firm. "You made a sacrifice." "There's a difference. And I've been too angry and too blind to see what that cost you." One rainy afternoon, Gabriel asked Natalie to sit with him by the floor-to-ceiling windows. The harbor was gray and choppy, mirroring the tumultuous emotions he'd kept locked away. "I need to tell you something," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "about why I've been the way I am." Natalie settled into the chair beside him, waiting. "My mother died when I was 12. Cancer, fast and brutal." He stared out at the water. "She was the only person who ever really saw me. Not my potential, not my usefulness to my father's empire. Just me," his hands clenched on the wheelchair arms. "My father remarried within a year. He didn't grieve. He just moved forward, like she was a business loss to be absorbed and forgotten. He taught me that emotions were weaknesses, that love was a liability." "Gabriel," Natalie said softly, reaching for his hand. He let her take it. "When my father told me I had to marry you, I was furious. Not at you, at him, at the loss of control. I took that anger out on the one person who didn't deserve it. You were hurting. That's not an excuse." He finally looked at her, his green eyes bright with unshed tears. "I've treated you terribly. I've made you feel unwanted in your own home. I've humiliated you with Vanessa. And through all of it, you've shown me more grace and kindness than I've shown anyone in years." A tear slipped down his cheek. "You terrify me, Natalie. Because somewhere between the hospital and today, I started caring about you. Really caring. And I don't know how to do that without getting hurt again." Natalie's own tears fell freely now. She moved from her chair to kneel beside his wheelchair, taking both his hands. "Then we'll learn together. Because I'm terrified too." "Why would you be terrified?" "Because I'm falling in love with you," she whispered. "And I never thought you'd let me." Gabriel's breath caught. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. "Natalie." "You don't have to say it back," she said quickly. "I just needed you to know." "I'm not good at this," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't know how to be the husband you deserve." "Then be the husband you can be. That's enough." The turning point that night, Gabriel couldn't sleep. His body ached from pushing too hard during physical therapy, but that wasn't what kept him awake. He kept replaying Natalie's words, her confession, the way she'd looked at him with such open, honest emotion. He heard soft footsteps in the hallway around 2 a.m. Using his cane, he made his way slowly to the kitchen. Natalie was there, making tea, wearing an oversized sweater, and looking beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or expensive clothes. Just her, real and present and impossibly kind. "Can't sleep?" she asked, not surprised to see him, thinking too much. She poured 2 cups of tea, carried them to the living room. They sat together on the sofa, the city lights glittering beyond the windows. "I've been remembering things," Gabriel said softly. "From the hospital. Moments when I was barely conscious, but I knew you were there. Your voice reading to me, your hand holding mine. I think some part of me knew even then that you were saving me." "The doctor saved you?" "No. He set his cup down, turning to face her fully. You saved me from becoming exactly like my father, cold, alone, incapable of real connection. He took her hand, holding it carefully like something precious. I don't know how to do this right. I've spent years building walls, and tearing them down feels impossible. But I want to try for you, for us. What are you saying? I'm saying that somewhere between resenting you and depending on you, I fell in love with you too. His voice shook with the admission. Real love. The kind that terrifies me because I know it could destroy me if I lose it. Natalie's breath hitched. You won't lose me. How can you be sure? Because I choose you, Gabriel. Not because of your money or your name or any arrangement your father made. I choose you because of who you are beneath all the armor. The man who works himself to exhaustion because he cares about his work. The man who secretly donates to children's hospitals because he remembers being a scared kid watching his mother die. The man who's fighting so hard to walk again because he refuses to give up. How do you know about the donations? She smiled. I pay attention, and I see you, all of you. Gabriel pulled her closer, his movement still careful because of his injuries, but urgent with emotion. I don't deserve you. Stop saying that. We deserve each other. We deserve to be happy. He cupped her face in both hands, his green eyes intense. I want to do this right. Court you properly. Take you on dates. Learn everything about you. Build something real. We have time, she whispered. Kiss me, he said, his voice rough with longing. Please, I need to know this is real. Natalie leaned in, closing the distance between them. Their lips met softly at first, tentative and exploring, then deeper, with months of suppressed emotion pouring out. Gabriel's hand tangled in her hair. She pressed closer, careful of his injuries but desperate for connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Gabriel rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said again, like he needed to practice saying the words. I'm going to spend the rest of our marriage proving it. We have time, she repeated, smiling through happy tears. A lifetime, he agreed. New beginnings, the next morning. Gabriel called his father. I'm cutting ties with Sterling Properties, he told Richard, his voice calm but firm. I'm keeping my tech company, but everything else you use to control me ends now. You'll regret this, Richard threatened. No, the only thing I regret is not standing up to you sooner. You gave me Natalie thinking you were buying a social trophy. Instead, you gave me the only thing that ever really mattered. Someone who loves me for who I am, not what I can give her. He hung up and turned to Natalie, who'd been listening from the doorway. You didn't have to do that, she said. Yes, I did. I'm done letting him control my life. Our life. Natalie crossed to him, settling into his lap carefully. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. I called my mother this morning, she said. Told her everything. The truth about our marriage, about these past months. What did she say? She said she always knew I'd find a way to make something beautiful out of something broken. Natalie smiled. She wants to meet you properly. As my husband. The one I actually love? I'd like that. He kissed her softly. I want to do everything with you. Meet your family. Take you places. Learn what makes you laugh. Build a real life together. Starting now? Starting now. They sat together as the morning sun filled the room, two people who'd started as strangers bound by obligation, now choosing each other freely. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. Gabriel still had months of recovery. They had a marriage to rebuild from the ground up. But for the first time, they faced it together, not as reluctant bride and resentful groom, but as partners, as lovers, as two hearts that had finally learned to surrender. The end.